Hello everyone, we're going to look at strings and characters today, and generally people take these things for granted. So at this point in your understanding of C# or any object-oriented programming language, you probably feel like you have a good handle on characters and a good handle on strings, and you're probably right. But they do have distinct individual pieces and properties that maybe you kind of glossed over because it's so easy to look at them in terms of kind of how we use them as human beings in a written language. So in other words, characters are essentially small pieces of strings, right? So a word is like hello is made up of 5 characters named H, E, L, L, and O, right? But that's not the way it works in programming. So let's start and do a new project. And let's keep it simple. This is not going to be anything that elaborate. So we're going to just have a single button in there. And you know I like to program the buttons, so I'm just going to go in there, create it. And what I'd like to do is actually maybe make it just a little bit bigger for you today. Usually I don't go through this. I leave the font alone and that sort of thing, but we'll make it maybe a little bit bigger. So let's go ahead and change the font to maybe something like more like 11. And we got a nice bigger button there. And we'll put it at the bottom. Then we'll call it button 1 or call it convert, because I have a feeling we're going to convert stuff in this thing. All right, now go ahead and click through to it, or we can just actually, let's go ahead and change the actual name itself to convert as well. And we'll call it big convert, since it will be creating a method here. And so some of you are probably used to this already. So if I call something char letter A equals A, that we know is a character. And actually, I'm going to take the A out of there, which would work better. And then we can also do a string called word. And we're going to set that word equal to a word. How about that? And I just checked, and as you can see there, we're getting a little bit of complaint there because we're not using it. But hey, we haven't even started making anything, use anything. So the first thing I want you to notice is that letters have the single quotes and strings have the double quotes. And that's because you have to delineate that difference. They are not the same thing. I cannot go up here and do this. In some scripting languages this will happen and they'll be all right with it, but here it's not going to like it because it's automatically going to assume that that is not a letter but a string, and therefore we should need to convert it. Now you can change. The easiest one to do is converting a character to a string. So let's create another word or another string, and we'll call it old cares, comma. So it's going to be out there, and it's going to be a bunch of old characters put together. So to convert something to a string from that, we could say that old cares is going to be just equal to, and actually we don't even need this quote, but we could just say letter dot to string semicolon, but we could do a plus, because if you remember what this is, that is a concatenation. So we're taking 2 letters and changing them to string and then putting them together, so that if I did a message box dot show of old, we should just get something like this. Hit convert, and there's the double A. So we know it's a string now because, why? Because message box only can show strings, and as you can see, there are two A's in there. So everything is kosher there. Now let's say I want to take the word word and change it into a bunch of characters. Well, in this case, what I would suggest doing is actually creating an array. I could say something to the effect of char, and then putting our square brackets in there, and we're going to call it, we'll call it old word. And then set it equal to, well, we could call it new char, and then give it some length. Oops. And what we can do is just this simple word to character array method that's built into C# or the C# libraries. And actually, I need to set that equal to something. We will turn that into old word is equal to word.array. And so let's do old word 1, which remember is the second one, so it should be an O. But this is a string, or we want it to be a string, so we need to put this from character to string. And oops, let's go ahead and hit start. And we get the O out there. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why would we ever want to do this? Well, we saw from our first example, sometimes you definitely need to put these into another data type in order to display them, like in the terms of the text box or a message box or a label. But what also you should be thinking about is, what did we just do here, right? We had a 2-string and a 2-character array. So this word, which was a string, can be operated to 2-char array. What if we were to do letter here? Letter is word. All of a sudden, that's not working, right? Because again, it is not a string. And that is going to be the difference, is that these guys are going to have properties that are associated with the specific data type. So let's take a look at these. And while we're taking a look at these, I want you to think about the actual process. So I know many people who work in terms of characters, so they love to take strings and break them down into characters. And the reason why they do that is because ultimately you can improve the speed of whatever you're doing. Strings are great, strings are flexible, but in the world of computing, the more easy something is to use, the more flexible it is to use, generally the more memory it takes up, and the more CPU time it's going to gobble up. So if you want to make something quick and light and speedy, it's always best to break it down into its simplest components, which makes sense that that would be a character. But as we can see from these characters, we can have all these specific things that we do for them. So we can tell if it's a letter, we can tell if it's a number inside of it. So if it's a 6, that's a character. Sure, it is a character, it's a keyboard character, but it is also a number. We can check that out. We can check if it's punctuation, white space, if something's uppercase or lowercase, and we can shift stuff from uppercase to lowercase. So that sounds pretty good, right? But now let's look at what we can do with the strings. And like I said, strings are going to actually have way more of these types of actions that we can put on them. We can check for substrings. So in other words, we can look if there's a turn and return, or if there is not cup and equip or something like that. Something like we can check out if they're the index, the individual pieces of the string. We can look at it as parts of a string. So, 2 or 3 chunks. We can remove stuff, we can move stuff around, we can insert stuff, we can put stuff at the end. We can do it all with strings because ultimately strings allows us, and you can almost think of a string as a list of characters in which we kind of just build and then subtract from. So let's try a couple. And we'll just use our message box again to try everything out. So we can do something to the effect of, let's say, old word. And again, we will put in a certain number. Let's put in 2 this time. So it would be the R in word. And say dot is white space. And actually, I've got this mixed up. I forgot it's old cares 2 here. This is the actual piece. And then we are going to send this out into a specific variable. Yeah, let me replace that then with the actual word care because we're operating on a care. And what this will return is a Boolean. So if I were to say, actually just put this in parentheses. The curly brackets around here. Then if it says if there's a white space in character 2, then go ahead and write this. So what this is saying is that if this is a white space, go ahead and show the message box. So in this case, oops, it says we have an error. Oh, I forgot to finish off the parenthesis. Yep. And let's go ahead and do that. Old cares is actually too long. Oh, I used the wrong one. There's one of the problems because it is an array. So what I want to do is use old word. I don't know why I was using old cares. And let's run it again. And as you can see, nothing's happening because guess what? There is no white space. So how do I change it to actually run through this if statement? Just merely put in the bang, which means not. And now if I run it, it's going to say if there's no white space, and to go ahead and show that, oh. Okay, now let's try something with the strings. And I always think that substring one is kind of interesting. So let's do this. We're going to say, now instead of the character, if the string variable, we'll use old, actually let's use word. If word, and we hit contains, and then we say OR, then go ahead and print out word. How about that? But we don't need, we need double quotes around the OR to make it happy. And we are getting one little, oh, we again forgot the parenthesis end, or I did, not you guys, you all. So let's go ahead and do that. And if I hit convert, sure enough, it prints out the word because there is an OR in there. But let's say we put out an AR. If we hit again, nothing happens because it knows, it checks through all that and sees if there's an AR anywhere in the word, in this case, word. I really shouldn't have. This is a little bit confusing because I actually created the word variable with the word literal in it. I always think that sometimes it makes it simpler so we don't have to remember it, but it can be confusing. Ultimately, it's not looking at the variable word, it's actually looking at the string literal word and whether or not there's an AR in it. So I would say go ahead, take a look back at those slides that I have. You can go on the web and find tons of both of these. Strings are going to have a lot more operators and properties you can pull off, but they're both very useful, and depending on what you want, you can use those things to your advantage. Now you can pretty much do whatever you want with both. It more depends again on speed or how hard it is and laborious it is to bring these things down into, say, something of character. But give it a try. Make something up for yourself. See, or if you have a project where you're doing something in the middle of and you want to take these and manipulate them in some way, go ahead and look at the operators and say which would be easier. And if one's easier than the other, it doesn't matter whether you have it in terms of characters or in strings, because we already know we can convert either of them to the other one, and then you can always do those operations on later. All right. Well, good luck.